Chinua Achebe once said that storytellers like me, our job is to create memories so that survivors can live on those memories. As long as I can remember, I've always been a storyteller. 2 months ago, my cousin, we had a chat, and he took me back to the times when as a 10-year-old, I used to entertain them via cinema. Now, this was a big box, candlelight, cardboard characters connected to wires, and a great story. And then I moved on to books. This is a handmade book I made in 2007. Made a bit of money from that. And then I moved to audiobooks just to sort of catch up, just to keep up with technology. And then I went back to traditional. This came out of Oxford, so it was a bit of a big deal. But this cost 10 pounds to get, so for me, it's ridiculous. Knowledge has to be free. In this day, knowledge has to be free. And then now, speaking of free knowledge, I'm here using Wikipedia to tell stories, to tell our own stories. Now, Wikipedia is by far the biggest encyclopedia. It's 17 times bigger than Britannica, and it's growing. Per day, it gets 160 million views per day. In fact, about 10% of the world uses Wikipedia. It's a very powerful tool. Now, before I talk more about WikiAfrica or Wikipedia, let me just tell you a story. It's a true story, it's a tragic story. This is Caine Phoya, known to Malawians of old days as Che Duncan, and known to me as Grandpa. Unfortunately, he died 2 months before I was born, but that's not the tragic part of the story. I remember being about 10 years old and just wondering, why is Grandpa putting on those funny clothes? It's hot in Malawi, in fact. But I didn't have the courage to ask my parents. That would have meant a slap, obviously. Years later, I was commissioned to write a book on the history of Malawi with him as one of the key architects of the kind of Malawi. And during the research of that process, I learned so much about him. He was one of the 4 chosen to lead Malawi towards independence. This was around 1951. After independence, he became one of the first African mayors. That's why he's putting on that funny gown. He also became one of the first successful indigenous business people in Malawi. In fact, his legacy was so powerful that when he died, he got this: a state funeral and a headline in Day Times. Now, in Malawi, in the old days, only Kamuzu Banda, our president, was the headliner. But on this day, thank you. The tragedy of this story is my family, most of my family don't know his story. Malawi doesn't honor his memory. And there are hundreds and hundreds of stories just like this in Malawi, hundreds. We are just not telling our stories. We're just not creating archival material so that the future can actually build on such legacies. Now, back to Wikipedia. Jimmy Wales, who's the founder of Wikipedia, wants us to imagine a world where the world's knowledge is available to everyone across the world. It's a noble quest, it's a radical idea, and judging by the numbers, we are slowly getting there. But for us as African storytellers or as Africans, the stakes are just a bit higher than that. Wikipedia gives us a chance to tell our own stories using such a very powerful platform. Now the question is, are we using such platforms to tell our stories? Yes, but the picture is not pretty. Now this represents geotagged articles. So every article on Wikipedia, you can actually trace its origin and the subject. So as you can see, towards the Western world, it's yellow. So yellow simply means articles on Wikipedia. And black simply means the absence of articles on Wikipedia. It's a pathetic image. In fact, ironically, it kind of takes us back to the dark continent, literally. Something needs to be done. WikiAfrica was started in 2006 to Africanize Wikipedia, to change or to balance Wikipedia, to make sure that Africa is well represented on Wikipedia, to change the image you saw earlier. In 2010, we came up with what we called the 30,000 mark, with the idea of contributing images, text, videos, about 30,000 within 2 years. In November 2012, we were able to reach that target. Now, in Malawi, with partners like the National Archives, Society of Malawi, the Museums of Malawi, and individuals, we've added over 500 images in the last 3 months alone. And we've added countless edits towards Wikipedia. We can do more, which is why I'm here, to invite you to join us in this movement. How do we work? I'll give you an example. This woman, this gorgeous, gorgeous woman, her name is Rose Chiwambo. For most people in Malawi, they know her simply as the face on the 200 Malawi Kwacha note. In fact, some of you use her to get to this venue. Now, for us, we want people like them, their stories, they need to be archived and preserved, for the present and for the future. She was one of the key women in the fight for independence in Malawi. After independence, she was the first female minister in Malawi. But unfortunately, 2 months later, she was implicated in what we now call the cabinet crisis, and she was fired from her post as minister. And the next 30 years of Dr. Banda's rule, she was actually exiled amongst other things. So our job is to make sure that her story, her legacy continues to grow. So what do? We go into archives, where we search for images like this. This is 1964, soon after independence. You can see she's standing next to Dr. Kamuzu Banda, our first president, and she's the only female in that group. Very inspiring. Again, here she is, surrounded by suits. And then what? We have these images. What do? Next, we go on Wikipedia, write her stories. And then what? We include such things. Now, her story shared with millions across the world. Her story archived for future generations to build on that legacy. We can do more. That's why, again, I'm here to let you guys know that you're more than welcome to join us in this. Everyone is welcome. Everyone is welcome. What other projects are we doing under the WikiAfrica? We have KeyWix. Now, KeyWix is an offline Wikipedia. The idea is we want to take it to places like in the rural areas where internet is yet to penetrate. It's only about 20 megabytes. Now, imagine 20 megabytes, the world's knowledge contained in just 20 megabytes. So one of our plans is to take that project to schools across Malawi and to people who don't have access to internet. And then under Wikidata, which is a sister to Wikipedia, we are gathering ancestral knowledge, whether it's oral or printed. We want to gather it and structure it, and then translate it into different languages to share with the rest of the world. Our story is being told, but unfortunately, it's not being told by us. We need to own our story, We need to own it. It's our story. So that future generations can actually build on that heritage, on that legacy. I thank you.